Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Matriarchal Voices from us here at the Matriarchy Times. My name is Farah. I'm joined today by a brand new podcaster and single mom, Kaitlyn. She has started a podcast this year, and so far it's doing really well. And we were inspired by it, and we really wanted to have her here to talk with us and to share more about her work and the direction that she's taking with her project. So, Kaitlyn, hi. So nice to have you here.
So nice to be here, Farhad. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to the entire team. I'm so happy to be here and have a conversation. And today I do want to, and one of the questions I do want to reference a single mom that I know that is actually writing a book on matriarchy. But I myself, again, I'm a working mom. I'm a new podcast host, as you mentioned, and I actually am married. And oftentimes, my husband will ask what I'm up to because I've been very busy these last, I would say, 6 months or so. And I always tell him I'm making the matriarchy. So that's something that I say that kind of encompasses a lot of things, including the podcast and having conversations like this. So thank you again.
Yeah, that's great. I really love the name that you put on your podcast, like Making Matriarchs. It sounds so inspiring. Like I was just thinking, like that sounds like it's going to go to places when you say Making Matriarchs. So, what pushed you to start this podcast?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that about the name. I think some of what the name to me means is that sometimes in life we're in the messy middle. And I think that we have to embrace that and realize that life is about change and life is about learning. And it's about the process too. And so for me, I consider myself like a matriarch in the making. So I'm always kind of thinking of myself as trying to improve myself. And I like to think of improving the world and inspiring others to be empowered within their own life or with whatever they're doing in the larger community or world around them. So that's a little bit about the name. I would say for me, making the podcast honestly was bold. I live in a conservative place with a lot of conservative relatives or people around me. But I had this realization that many of the people that are in control, they actually don't know what's best. I think sometimes we think the people that are in control or have a lot of wealth or have a lot of influence, they deserve that position of power or that position of influence. And I don't always think that's the case. And I think sometimes marginalized people, including women, we doubt our own abilities, we doubt our own qualifications. And I think of mothers, women, marginalized people, sometimes those are the very best people to actually serve and to actually have a position of influence or a position of power because they would have more of the values that I think should be important for everyone and more of the values that should be important for leadership. And right now, I think we have leadership and what's strong or not strong. I think we kind of have those values and attributes sort of upside down right now in some parts of our society. So even influencers, some influencers I've become very annoyed with because they don't always care about their followers, right? And they're
Yeah.
not always someone that I want influencing me. So I really thank you and your entire team for leading and being a really good example of people that want change and want what's best for our society and world. And hats off to you on that. Just as an individual, I call myself a recovering people pleaser. I've always been afraid of not being liked. That's been programmed in me as a young child. So I'm constantly in the process of unlearning that and trying to actively not be that way, to be honest with you. I had a realization that many people close to me, they weren't considering my opinion or my feelings and the things that they were doing. Just as an example, in my opinion, voting for someone that should be disqualified for a variety of reasons. They weren't thinking of me when they did that. So why am I constantly thinking about their opinion or their approval? Really, I think we all need our own approval. I saw a quote recently that you should only care about two people's opinion, and that's 8-year-old version of you. What would their opinion be about you? And 80-year-old version of you. What would their opinion be about you? That's what matters, not getting approval from other people or being liked or being accepted by those around you. Our survival brain makes us think that that's the only important thing, but it's not most of the time. So again, it's not my job to make people comfortable. It's my job to be me. And that sometimes includes making people uncomfortable or speaking truth to power.
I like there's so much that I want to ask you after hearing that because I'm not a recovering people pleaser. I'm still a people pleaser.
Well,
And
hats off to you for admitting that. I think that's the first thing. If you want to change something, you have to radically accept where you're at. And that was a realization that I had shortly after the US election, radically accepting that there are unhealed wounds that we as a society have, that we as individuals have. And once you accept that, then you can actually change it. If you live in denial and you're not recognizing things, or you're burying your head in the sand, or you're not aware that I am a people pleaser, you're not able to change it. But as soon as you recognize that, as soon as you're aware of it, now you're on the path that you can change it and you can alchemize it.
yeah, but the people pleasing, I guess, I don't know. I think a lot of people have this problem. Is it a societal expectation also, like politeness and just saying yes, not saying no to certain demands? And I think women, especially, are programmed to be people pleasers and are sort of expected to be people pleasers. So that is where all the problems start for girls and women, I think.
I can't agree more. I think that there's an undue burden and expectation for marginalized people, especially girls and women, to be pleasing to those around them. And I honestly think a lot of people are people pleasers. I don't think it's uncommon. I think it's very common. And I think the default will kind of be that you will self-abandon or you will be a people pleaser because that's what society wants you to do. It makes it easier for the people around you if you are a people pleaser sometimes, right? So you have to kind of be aware of this. And then once you're aware of it, you can change it. But I think socialization, especially as a child, really plays a large role. And I believe that women and girls are really socialized this way. I notice it with my own kids. I honestly sometimes I think condition them a little bit to be people pleasers. I try to undo that when I can, but they don't get the same corrections as boys as like, for example, my niece gets as a girl. She's constantly being expected to caretake or be polite or have this really high standard of like how her behavior should be. And my boys are not held to that same standard. So I see it play out in front of me sometimes. And I think it's very real. And if you even look at the health consequences of this. I think women's health is not well understood and not well studied, but also a lot of women have autoimmune conditions. So I think if you think about the conditioning that we as women have, that plays out in a lot of different ways and manifests in a lot of different ways, including even our health.
It's yeah, health. When you talk about health, like it's mostly mental health, but it's also manifesting physically in some people as well. I
Agreed.
can see it when people are in very stressful situations, like, and they are overthinking, and I just, it just keeps on building up and building up to a point where women just can't take it anymore, and then something really bad will happen. So, in your experience, like while you've
Mhm.
been doing your podcast, talking to people, like what's probably the worst thing that you ever heard happening to someone because of their people pleasing?
Yeah, and I will kind of comment on this based off of what I see within people, like within my own life or within other people's families, I would say that although we have a patriarchal society, we have situations where I think sometimes women, especially maybe mothers, are expected to do more emotional labor or more things that are actually not their own. And I think that that's been honestly a thing that's happened through generations. If you think about women or mothers, basically for their family, almost jumping in and being kind of a codependent person that tries to take care of everything and fix everything and make everything perfect, right? When that happens, and I'm a recovering codependent person as well, when I jump in and try to fix somebody else's problems for them, I'm actually taking something away from them. And I'm taking an opportunity away from them to take ownership in their own life. And I might actually be enabling something by jumping in and fixing it and feeling like I'm in control of the situation. I'm going to make it all better. I'm going to make it picture perfect so that it reflects positively on me. When I have that mindset, I can actually enable bad things to happen. So in the episode that I just released, the woman was actually talking about codependency related to addiction. And she said that a lot of people, when there's an addiction in the family, there's also codependency. So there's people that are typically enabling that addiction to occur. And I see that happening around me and within my own life, women taking on a lot of burden and taking on a lot of um, work and things that aren't theirs all the time and things that belong to other people, there can be negative consequences to that, I think, as well, including their own health, including enabling something within that person, an issue within that person, because they don't have to suffer the consequences of their own actions. When people don't have to suffer the consequences of their own actions, then you can see why other problems manifest within their own life, right? So that has been kind of a theme. And I don't know if it's honestly on a lot of episodes other than my most recent one about codependency, but it's something that comes up in conversations that I have offline. And it's a theme that I've been seeing. I also will say that when you have internalized misogyny, when you've internalized the what you've been told your entire life. And why wouldn't you, right? There's no blame here. It's just that's kind of what you're programmed with. Um, when you've done that, you might not have the value, the internal value, the internal self-respect that you should have. I'm actually listening to a book right now, and this person was a people pleaser, basically the way she was socialized. And she actually had sexual trauma as a child that she repressed until later in her life, when her daughters became that age. Then she realized this has been happening to her. That I think when you are socialized with thinking that you're less than, or thinking that some of this behavior that people display is maybe okay or justified, or that you're the problem and that it was deserved, when you internalize that, then I think that you can see why there's so much mistreatment in our world and in our culture, because some people think that they deserve to be mistreated and you almost allow it. And I'm not victim blaming or anything like that. I'm just saying that we have a lot of we have honestly a lot of toxicity, I would say, and emotional immaturity from some people that aren't expected to have certain levels of maturity or what we should expect from leaders. Those things are almost allowed or excused, and sometimes even by women because they've had these internalized. I think of it as internalized misogyny. It's almost accepted. It's almost okay for certain people to do bad things, right? And then other people are like blamed as the problem. So I don't know if that made sense, but those are some of the ramifications, I think, of some of the problems that we have as society, when we don't when some of us aren't emotionally healed and aren't expected to meet certain standards that I think everyone should meet, especially leaders. That sends bad messages to other people. And I think it's easy to for people to be blamed for some of the issues in our society versus saying, hey, who is actually the perpetrator here? Who is actually doing something wrong and not blaming the victim, basically.
Yeah, no, I understood everything you said, and also I felt a little seen as well. The enabling, and what I didn't understand was, how does codependency increase the possibility of addiction? I was wondering if
Mm.
you could elaborate a bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in this area, so I would say listen to that episode with Anna because she goes into it. She always introduces herself of the wife of an addict in recovery, and I myself am recovering from codependency. And an example she gives in that episode is that she talks about a situation that happens, and her husband felt bad about a situation that he had caused. But she saw that he was hurting and she went into her people pleasing or codependency patterns because we always go into the patterns that are most familiar to us. And she tried to fix how he was feeling about something rather than letting him face the consequences and the uncomfortable feelings or the uncomfortable consequences that come because of his behavior. She was trying to jump in and fix that for him. So she was actually, in a way, doing him a disservice by not letting him face the consequences of his own action. By jumping in and trying to fix it for him, she was actually making the situation worse and almost enabling the behavior, his behavior to continue because she wasn't establishing strong boundaries herself. And she was self-abandoning in that process. She was only thinking about how do I fix him having an uncomfortable feeling or having an uncomfortable consequence. She was thinking of that versus what do I need in this situation? What are the boundaries that it makes sense for me to have as a person? And what are the needs that I have? And how can I establish boundaries that make me feel safe? She that was a big shift for her. And that ultimately her shifting and understanding that she had value, she needed to establish boundaries, she needed to take care of herself. And that's truly the only thing she's in control of. She wasn't in control of his behaviors or his actions, but she could establish boundaries. Once she did that, they were actually more on a path of healing. And I think it's just a thing that women often do is trying to fix things within their family and fix things for other people. But sometimes we can actually make the problem worse and
Mhm.
enable that person to continue the behavior.
I think getting out of a codependent situation, like trying to stop being someone who's people pleasing and who someone else is codependent on, trying to get out of a situation like that takes a certain amount of bravery, because you would have to be willing to sit and watch the person that you have been looking after and taking care of going through something really difficult and tough. And you're going to get blamed, you're going to get abused, possibly. You're going to probably see some things that you wish you never saw, like behavior and pain and suffering, and just having to sit back and watch that. I don't know how people, like, that's something really tough and something really brave to do, especially since you're actually doing it for them in the end.
Exactly, exactly. It is very hard. I talk about in the episode, it's actually easier to jump into your old patterns, make it feel like you're in control, make it feel like you can fix it, right? Even though it's somebody else's problem. That's
Mm,
the quote unquote easier thing to do. It's
yeah.
harder to say, I'm going to change this pattern, I'm going to change this dynamic. What do I need in the situation? And what is the level of respect that I need and I deserve, even though maybe I've never gotten it in this relationship or I'm not used to getting it? I know I deserve it. And so, what are those things that I need? And I think, kind of to some of the things that you brought up, I think it's recognizing, and I'll be honest, this even sometimes happens with my husband and I, if one of us gets a little bit cranky and maybe he's talking to me in that tone, in a certain tone, or doing a certain thing, I take a breath, I center myself, and I realize that I'm only in control of myself. I'm not in control of his behavior, but I am in control of the boundaries that I set. If you continue talking to me that way, I will walk away. I need you to talk in a calmer tone, or we can come back to this later when you are more calm, but I'm not going to continue to engage with you if you're talking to me in that way. Again, maybe they're upset about something. You can be upset about something. You can feel whatever you want to feel about me establishing this boundary or whatever it is that, whatever consequence that you're facing. But I will not allow you to behave XYZ way. If this happens, I'm leaving and I'm spending the night at my friend's house, or I'm calling a hotline. I'm asking other people for help, and I'm getting out of that situation and leaving if needed. I think that is very hard to do. I think as humans, we want to follow familiar patterns because our brain thinks that that will be safe if we're doing things that we've done before. But actually, sometimes you need to recognize when I am or am not safe is different than when my brain is telling me that I am and am not safe. And I think of the brain and the body as different. I think the body knows, like when we have a pit in our stomach, when we feel a certain way, to me, that's the body knowing, and we should never not listen to that. We have to listen to the fire within us. We have to listen when we have that pit in our stomach, mother's intuition, whatever you want to call it, God-given guidance, whatever it is for you, whatever your belief structures, you have to follow that quiet knowing. But sometimes our brain is just following the patterns that we've done before, and our brain's not right. So for me, a recovering people pleaser, sometimes I feel like my world is ending because I think someone's mad at me, or I think I said the wrong thing. And I have to stop myself and think, I'm not actually facing a lion in the jungle. My tribe isn't actually kicking me out. It just feels that way because I've been conditioned as a people pleaser. Someone's allowed to be mad at me. Someone can contact me if they're mad about something and we can talk it through. But right now, I don't have to run and take action or do anything. I'm just feeling uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that I'm truly in danger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does a lot of sense actually. Because our brains tell us things are okay when we keep doing the same thing over and over again because it's used to it. As soon as we want to challenge ourselves to do something different, or we try to do something like radically, like contrary to what we've been doing all this time, then the brain is like, no, 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 you're in danger, you're in danger. But it could be you heading towards safety also.
Exactly. And I think it's important to know that as a people pleaser because you have to know that other people's brains are doing that same thing. So when you
Yeah.
start making change within your own life, within your own family, within your own community, people are used to what they've done before. So you doing something different that might be bringing up a trigger for them, that it's about them, right? It's not always about you. I think we think everything's about us, but sometimes you doing something differently, that can bring up something for someone else based on their programming. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
that they're right and you're wrong or whatever. It just means that they were used to something happening before and you're doing something differently. And with that, there will be reaction to that. But it doesn't mean don't follow your path, don't follow your passion. It just means people will have their opinions and you don't have to get approval from someone else in a lot of situations. I know there's always exceptions. Keep yourself safe and keep yourself, getting what you need. But I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that was such an aha moment, actually. Like
Oh, good.
realizing that that's why it's so difficult to make a change with the way you relate to someone. I think people give up on relationships so easily and they think, "Well, I'm not compatible with this person," is because it's so easy to get into a pattern and it's so easy to get into being used to how someone behaves, how someone talks, how someone reacts to you. As
Mhm.
soon as maybe, and even that doesn't feel like it's working, but you stay together because you're used to it. And then when you want to switch it to something better, like try to maybe do something that'll make you a bit more comfortable in the relationship, maybe make you a bit more happier in the relationship, and then you find it it becomes a conflict, and maybe you could have been on the path to becoming a great relationship, from a good relationship to a great relationship, but people don't get
Mhm.
there because they give up like once they start feeling that pressure and that pushback and that confusion.
Yeah,
So
no,
that's
I totally agree with that. And I think it's really important back to what can you control and what you cannot control. You won't be able to control someone, bless you, you won't be able to control someone else's behavior or what they do. But what you are in control of is being attuned with yourself and knowing what it is that you want and making that known, making it known, this is how I would like to be treated. I know this is different than what we've done before. When this happened, I felt this way. It may be related to my socialization as a kid. How is that for you? Might have been different. But what I want to happen is I want to have a respectful relationship or respectful partnership. And these are the things I want from you. And giving them a chance to either meet that or not meet that. And over time, you'll get your answer, right? And it's not a good or bad thing. It's just knowing what it is that I deserve or what I want or how I want my life to be, and then understanding if that partner can or can't meet you there. But change is very hard. And so I think you have to get in touch with yourself and know what it is that you want so that you can communicate effectively and that you know what you deserve. And sometimes I think even just energetically, if you know that you don't deserve something, it begins to not happen anymore, especially when you're brave enough to establish those boundaries. Then more things will come to you that are aligned. But when you have disrespect in one area of your life or one relationship in your life, you can sometimes let that snowball and invite more of that in. And again, I'm not victim blaming. There's so many reasons why this can happen. Even myself at a young age, I was in an emotionally abusive relationship. And I still love that version of me. I have compassion for her. I don't have judgment. I have compassion, and I've learned so much from that. I hope this is kind of making sense and helping.
yeah, it does help. Don't worry, everything you're saying makes so much sense. And on that note, I'd just like to give you a compliment. I'm so glad that you started your podcast because I feel like you have so much to say and so much to share, and your words are powerful, and what you're saying is so relatable and easy to understand. So I am looking forward to actually, I'm going to link your podcast in the description of this podcast as well so other people can also discover it, I hope. And yeah, so please don't give up because you have come to a point where you have healed yourself to a point where you are able to heal other people. So thank you so much for starting this and thank you so much for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, how I kind of view the world right now is there are deep wounds that need healing, and we should try to heal those wounds, really. And I think that a leader is someone that admits where they've gone wrong, how they've made improvements, and what they have left to heal. So, in no way do I think I have everything figured out. I don't. But any area where I have learned something, I am willing to authentically and vulnerably share because my ultimate goal is to help people and to help people within their own lives. So I will do that even when my people pleaser brain is like, no, no, don't do that. You have to be perfect. I'm like, no, you're taking a back seat. I'm not letting you drive the show anymore. All of us, I think, living our authentic lives and doing the best we can, that's really all we can ask of ourselves. And then that makes our 80-year-old version of us, if we get to that point, we make ourselves proud, right? So that's really kind of what I'm after.
So all these problems that we were discussing, like this codependency and addiction and all these things, do you think that when we work towards a matriarchy, when we work towards matriarchal thinking and stuff, how will all this change? Like, what do you envision?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of a couple things off the top of my head. I think as society, we used to think that people that acted like they were powerful or had all the answers, but were deeply unhealed, sometimes those are our people in charge. And I think there's a problem with that. I think there should be more focus on community and true community. I think community is like a buzzword. And when we hear community, at least in my American culture or in the United States, I think when people say community, they think, oh, I'm going to be around people that always agree with me about everything and validate everything that I do. I actually think of it completely differently. Yes, you need to find people that see you fully, that love you fully, even though you might disagree, or even though you might be very different, or even if you're a different generation or have different titles. I think a lot of times patriarchy, it easily pits women against each other, where we feel like we have to compete against each other. I think that's totally false. I think as people and as women, we are supposed to be in community with each other. We are supposed to be uplifting each other. But I think of community as actually being very honest with each other and being honest with ourselves. So when someone is facing an issue, I do think it's important to talk to someone and have support, not codependency or enabling, but this is the problem that I'm facing. And having community and having people that can tell you, this is what I'm seeing. And sometimes that not be comfortable and not be what you want to hear. I think a true friend will sometimes tell you something that you don't want to hear. And they'll say it with love. I'm not saying accept abuse or anything like that, but sometimes we do need each other to see each other and to see ourselves fully. And sometimes getting different perspectives and having support outside of ourselves and having an interdependence is very important. And I actually think of that as a matriarchal concept. I think society right now, it's almost like only women with the same exact title, either they're single cat ladies and they're this many years old, or they're like mothers and they only can take care of their nuclear family and they shouldn't do anything outside their church. Like, I think patriarchy makes us go in our own little groups and it divides us. And I think when there's conversations across generations, conversations across people doing different things that are aligned with their purpose in their life, that's true community. Not this little group, we all are exactly the same. I think true community is like we're all different and we have a different role to play and we have different gifts, but we're stronger together. Together, we can do a lot. It's not necessarily about the individual leading, but I think it is about self-actualization and self-actualization with each other and valuing life and valuing all life is kind of an important piece, I believe.
So how do you think mainstream feminism is actually contributing towards going to this goal? Because it doesn't exactly embody matriarchy as such. There's a bit of a difference. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, my opinion on this is the dominant structure is always looking for something else to blame, right? And in my opinion, the dominant structure that we have today is patriarchy. And
Yeah.
with that, that dominant structure will love to blame an alternative to it, or will love to scapegoat other problems or other people as being the reason that society is the way it is. At least in the United States, I think feminism is blamed for the state of undue burden and demand that women have. And I don't think of that as necessarily true. I think of feminism as, regardless of gender identity, people having the same opportunities or the same choices is how I defend or how I think of feminism. Um, but I think the structure that we have is still patriarchy and is still a structure that enables, honestly, racism or classism or, sexism or abuse. And
Yeah.
so I think patriarchy likes to blame feminism because it's like, oh, that's the problem that that some people had, oh, some of the same opportunities as men. But I think what we've where we're at right now is I don't think feminism is actually truly achieved. I don't think that everybody has equal opportunity. I believe that a lot of the opportunities that most people have are based off of what they were, the circumstances that they were born into. The circumstances of were their parents emotionally available or not? Did their parents have access to resources or not? That has a huge bearing on the outcomes and the possibilities within your life. Not always. And I'm not saying that to like limit anyone. I just think that we don't actually have a society where there is open access and open opportunities to everyone, regardless of gender. I don't think that's achieved yet. But I think of matriarchy as a little bit different than feminism. Feminism's more about everyone having the same opportunities regardless of their gender identity. But I think of matriarchy as just a different value structure than patriarchy altogether. So I think of matriarchy as valuing the child or valuing the next generation and more so being stewards of Mother Earth and our world so that we leave it better than we found it, and valuing life and caretaking in all forms of life, whether it's a newborn baby and a single mom that needs support, or it's someone that's 80 years old, and maybe we should take more wisdom from that person versus kicking them off their health insurance, at least in the United States. Um, so I think it's valuing all life and not allowing greed and corruption and profit over everything, which I think right now that's what patriarchy enables. So I think of matriarchy as actually like the solution to some of the problems that we have, whereas feminism is more about the structure that we currently have and opening that up to everyone. I don't think that that's always possible when we have these underlying issues with our dominant structure, if that makes sense.
Yes. And also, people are very reluctant to think about a matriarchy because there's so much stuff that they don't understand about what a matriarchy really is. And they think that it's just going to be another patriarchy flipped on its head, but it's not.
Right.
And so, what do you think? Like, what can you tell people? Like, use this time to tell people like what they should unlearn about matriarchy. Like, what are the myths that they should cancel from their heads about matriarchy, just to get everyone on the same page?
Yeah, I would say one of my episodes that I think is most applicable to the topic that we're talking about right now is with Nargis. She is a single mom that I mentioned earlier today. She is raising her daughter and also writing a community funded book called Matriarchy. And she also has social media and things like that. So I would check her out. But I agree with her that, and with you, that it doesn't necessarily mean that women are in control of everything. Again, it's a different model, different value structure altogether. And so I think that she has some really great thoughts about this. But I think that a misconception is that this is just about a different gender having control. I don't agree with that. I think, honestly, in my culture at least, we put way too much emphasis on gender and the binary of male and female. And patriarchy, it relies on us having that binary. So you can see how threatened it is sometimes when our understanding of this evolves, even from a science perspective, which they say it's about science, but when you look at the science, you can see that hormones and bodies and even the physical that's created, there's a spectrum of this, right? There's not this 100% definition of what a male or female is. And I think of gender as the same thing. So I think that women, or I think that as individuals, we don't have to stay within our gender binaries. I know women that have internalized misogyny and they embody patriarchy even better than some men that I have, honestly. And I know some men have values that actually align with matriarchy. So it's less about gender than we like to think. I think our human brain, we like the white and black. We like understanding things very easily. And that's what we go with. And again, back to some of what we talked about, when something shows up and it's different than that, we're threatened by it because that's what our brain is used to and that's what our brain understands.
So when we're thinking about a change, like for me, what I believe is more than what we see outside, more than seeing people getting equal opportunities, more than seeing changes happening. I think the biggest focus that we need to have is on changing people internally, like changing people the way they think. And I think just, trying to reach people on an emotional level or an intellectual level will lead us to a matriarchy faster than trying to force it onto people and trying to shout about it or trying to kind of be very bold about it. But I think it's needed to a very, like a large extent. It's needed. People need to talk about it. People need to fight about it because otherwise, like people are not going to accept it. But
Mhm.
we need to kind of very uh, concentrate a lot on trying to help people to change their minds, change the way they think.
Yeah, I agree with there was so much of what you said that I think is really good. I agree with that. And I think, back to my view of what am I in control of and what am I not in control of? It's not necessarily my job, I believe, to necessarily convince anyone of anything, right? I think it's my job to live my life authentically and to be bold when necessary and to be different when necessary, even though my survival brain gets mad at me, right? I think that's my
Yeah.
job is to follow my path and to find my people and know that some people will love me even if they disagree, right? And to not be afraid to do that. Um, so that's something that's important to me. But I agree that I think some of the problem is that we actually have an unhealed world in some ways. In some ways, we have a beautiful, healed world. There's so much beauty out there. And I think there's actually matriarchy that exists even within patriarchy. And there's beautiful things that can be made and created regardless of this dominant structure, regardless of our government, whatever, regardless of any of that stuff, we can still create beautiful change and beautiful things in community with each other by joining another group or contributing to something or doing your own thing. There's so many possibilities in this world. Um, but I think that, where was I even going with this? I don't even remember the question. Can you remind me of the question?
And I was talking about how we need to change people's mindsets rather
Yeah,
than forcing them to change.
yeah. But some people I do see as unhealed, right? And I don't do that to say, oh, I'm better than them or no better than them. It's not about like a hierarchy or a judgment. It's just that having a deeper understanding that when you're facing a big problem in your life, and someone tells you that it's somebody else's fault, that is the reason for your circumstances. That's a really convenient lie to believe. That's very nice for our survival brain to say, oh, okay, it's not your fault. It's not what you're doing, or it's not the patriarchy's fault. It's actually this person over here. They're to blame for your problems. That's, we love that. That's like an easy problem. We're like white and black thinking, oh, that's the problem over there. I can point my finger, not look internally, not look at what as a society we need to change because it's like an easy fix. So I think we like that and people are attracted to that. And I see that as human nature. I don't see that as, oh, this person should be written off and doesn't have any inherent value. Again, matriarchy, I would say everyone has inherent value. And I think if everyone grew up knowing that they have inherent value and being seen for who they are as an individual, we would have more healing in our world. But that's not what we had, right? A lot of us maybe had unhealed parents. They were probably doing their best, but they were raised with these generational traumas and a lot of honestly lies and propaganda that it's programmed into our brain. That's very hard to unlearn. And then we give that to our children, and then they have to try to unlearn some of that, but they get that. So the cycle kind of perpetuates in a way. And so I think when I encounter someone that views something differently than me or has an issue with what I'm saying, I actually know that there's probably a deep hurt there and there's a deep pain that I may or may not know anything about. But that doesn't mean that I hate that person. I might not be inviting them over for tea and giving them a lot of space in my life, right? I still have to protect myself and have my own boundaries, but I can see that there's something that's unhealed. And again, it's up to them if they want to heal that or not. It's not my responsibility, but it is my responsibility to live my life fully and authentically. And if someone does want healing, it's my job to try to do that. And I don't see myself as I don't see myself as like knowing better than them. Again, it's just back to, I think sometimes you need a relationship or a community or a friend that sees something and kind of share something with that person, and then they can do what they want with it. But to actually make change by being, rude to someone that thinks differently than me, I might honestly be perpetuating the story that they have in their brain. Um, so if I'm, this different political party than them or something, and they have in their brain that everybody in that political party, they're wrong, they're mean, this is all they like, they don't care about us or whatever. If I show up to a conversation with that person and I am mean and write them off and don't listen to them, I'm almost like perpetuating that story. But if I show up and I'm in the right headspace and I can say, oh, like, what makes you feel that way? Like, oh, is that what you learned in childhood? Like, oh, that's really interesting. You think this. Like, why do you think that? And I actually ask them questions and I'm curious. That's very disarming. I'm not saying I know better than you, but I'm saying, why do you feel that way? And not like a to prove them wrong thing, but like a genuine curiosity. You can have an insightful conversation by that. Usually there's something in their childhood or a traumatic event that they had or a belief structure that was pushed upon them that you can see them acting out of comfort and patterns and wanting to feel safe in the world. But you can kind of see where it's coming from and you might still be able to see them as a person. Maybe you see them unhealed, that's your opinion, but you can understand kind of how they've gotten there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, like you said, it's so important that the healing happens earlier, preferably in our families, preferably our parents are healing themselves and trying not to pass on trauma to us. But I think we are the generation that is the one that started looking at mental health. So, I just now that we have this space, now that we have this opportunity, like what advice would you give young girls growing up in this society? Like, how would you advise them, or even any young kid, like girl or boy, it doesn't matter, like how would you advise them to deal with this going forward,
It's a
growing up
really
in
good
this
question.
society? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say when you see something that you know is inherently wrong, it may be inherently wrong, even if the adults in your life or other people in your life don't see it. You might be seeing something unique, and you might be someone that plays a role in changing that potentially. I agree with you about our generation being change makers. I think of the generation behind us even more so being that. So knowing that everybody sees the world a little bit differently, and if you see something that in your soul, in your stomach, you know that that's not right. It might not be right, even if everybody else is acting like it is. So you don't have to gaslight yourself. You don't have to convince yourself to see the world exactly as other people do. You were, in my opinion, my personal and spiritual opinion, you are here for a reason. And what you're seeing as wrong might actually be wrong. And knowing that regardless of any person, your family situation, your friends, you are inherently deserving, you inherently deserve value, you inherently deserve respect. And knowing that and working on that worth is very important. And something that I learned is like you can pick your friends. When I was young, I thought that the people coming into my life, I had to like help them and I had to like keep them around and I had to have like these friendships with them and continue to pour into them, pour into them, pour into them, even if they weren't pouring back into me. And in adulthood, I realized that that was a little bit of my like codependency, right? I would gravitate towards people that needed healing or had some sort of issue, and I would try to play little Miss Fix-It or make them happy. And I'm realizing that that's still my gift to do that, but it's not my job to stick around in a situation where I'm not being respected. And it is my job to be fully and authentically myself so that people that are actually meant to be my friend or actually can love me fully, they see me fully and I give them an opportunity to love me fully. I shouldn't become a version of myself that just makes other people happy. You should become yourself fully. And there are times in your young life where this is going to be very, very hard. And it will get easier, in my opinion. I think it's harder to be a middle schooler or like, a younger child. I'm forgetting the education system there, but I think it's harder to be I think it's great to be a young child because I think you actually have this inherent knowing of like what's important in life. And of course, their, cognitive abilities and behavior abilities, they don't act those things out. They're not emotionally mature enough to always be living that way, right? Their brains aren't fully developed yet. So I've learned that as a mother, and to not take my kids' behavior personally all the time. But I think you're born with knowing what's important. And then the world tells you otherwise. And then you take that in and you think you have to be a different version of yourself and you have to put yourself in a box. You don't have to put yourself in a box. And by being yourself fully, you'll actually bring in more people to you than being a different version of yourself. There's always going to be people that criticize, that don't like you. It's again because of things we've talked about, their own internal wounds, but that's not your job to make them comfortable. It's your job to be you and to be yourself authentically and beautifully, and it gets easier. It gets easier as you become an adult. And if you do the hard work earlier on and you're aware of some of these things, it will become even easier for you later. On the flip side of that, if you're listening to this and you're not in childhood and you're however old, you're at the ultimate, the other spectrum, it's never too late. It's never too late to change. It's never too late to say, I'm sorry if you're truly sorry about something. It's never too late to make a change. It's harder as you've repeated the same patterns in your life, but you can still change things within your life, regardless of how old you are.
Um, that was really great, Kaitlyn. Thank you so much. I'm sure that this advice that you gave young people and also people who are not young and still are looking to have a change, um, really, it isn't too late. And I'm so glad that you said that because there are so many people who are out there thinking like it's too late to change, like I can't change now, nothing I do will make a difference. So maybe just hearing you say that will help people like try to get things moving in their lives. So specifically, if you were to advise women like who want to change, like but haven't been able to find the courage maybe to get started, like what would you say to them? How would you inspire them?
I would say listen to the fire. Sit with the fire. Don't dim your fire. Don't try to put it out and say, there's nothing here, ignore this. No, sit with the fire, understand what's there to be listened to, uncovered, learned. If you're feeling that way, there's a reason for it. So, a lot of times, anger can also be the emotion that we're having when we have a lot of unprocessed grief. And grief can be from a lot of things, not just like a loved one passing away or something like that. It could also be grief of not having your needs met, or some other type of grief, or deeply wanting a change that you want in the world, or it could be so many things, really, grief can be. But sitting with that and understanding where is this coming from? Where where do I have a need with this? Where do I have a passion? Where do I have a desire that I should be following more consistently, or I need to start taking action on? And where where am I being triggered as well? So I think it can be all of those different things, or maybe a combination of things. When you have that fire, you feel frustrated, there usually is an underlying need. And knowing that you should follow that. You're deserving of having your needs met. You're deserving of living the life that you want to live. You're deserving of contributing positively to something that you feel passionately about, even if those around you don't understand or don't get it. You might be a little bit more of the change maker than them. Change happens, sometimes slowly, and then it'll rapidly happen sometimes as well. But when something's happening, not everyone sees it, not everyone understands. So if you're seeing something and you want to change it, you might be kind of like at the forefront of those 10% of people that are actually seeing it and taking action. Doesn't mean that the 90% have to agree with you, right? To back to what some of what we've talked about today. They might be deeply unhealed. So you don't want to base your opinion off of someone that's doing nothing or is deeply unhealed. You don't want to base your actions based off of someone else. You have to take aligned action based off of your values and you as an individual. So I think sometimes as individuals, we think, oh, we can't possibly help this. This is too big of a problem to solve. But even small actions make a big difference. And even small actions or small steps can lead to bigger and bigger change. And sometimes even the small actions that we take are more meaningful for those around us than we will ever know. I do believe, just my personal opinion, we don't always get to know all the change that we make. Sometimes we say something that deeply impacts someone, but they forget to tell us, or we lead by example on something and that inspires someone to go and do something within their own life, but they don't always think to tell us that, right? They're in their own head, they're doing their own thing. And so sometimes we don't get to know these things, but we have to do these things anyway. We have to do these things for ourselves. We have to do these things to live authentically in our life. And when you are living authentically, that will inspire other people. It will. Even if we don't know, even if we think it's so minor and it's so small and it doesn't matter, it does matter. Small things do matter. Um, I'm in no way claiming any credit for this, but I've noticed some of the women in my life that I'm in community with, they knew that I was starting a podcast, or I was doing this, or I was doing that, or speaking out about something. And I've seen them boldly step into their power and their individual path, whether it's running for office or starting a public cooking page, or, writing an article or apologizing publicly about something and how they went wrong and how they want to get better, and knowing that that's okay. To be vulnerable is actually a strength. And so me showing that vulnerability and authenticity are really important, and taking aligned action based on my own values, me doing that can inspire someone else to do that as well. Sometimes I know about these things, a lot of times maybe I don't. I have no idea what change I will make, but I have to at least try to take aligned action with my values. That's all that you can ask of yourself, is to take aligned action for what it is that you want, take up space, know that you're worthy and you're valuable just for being you. So be fully you, even if it makes other people uncomfortable. They might need to feel a little uncomfortable. They may or may not ever change, but you might be giving inspiration to someone else. And I think all of us as humans, we're supposed to be in community with each other. We need each other. Again, not as codependents, but having interdependence with each other. So if there's something you feel strongly about, I would say just even starting with researching what's out there already. Where can I contribute? Where can I just give an encouraging word, or ask a question, or contribute to something that already exists? Maybe you want to start there. But certainly you can make big change within your life a lot of the time. So I encourage people to listen to that little fire, don't dim it, and actually like cultivate it and feed it. And I like to think of alchemizing my pain. So I obviously have had a lot of pain in my life. You'll hear more about it in the podcast, I'm sure, if anybody ever listens to it. But I try to think about, how can I use this for fuel? How can I use this pain or fire? And how can I make the next best step that actually gets me closer to what I want? And kind of back to our one of our earlier questions, a lot of, for me, I like to think of myself as making the matriarchy. And I think we all can make matriarchies in our own life. We can all become matriarchs in our own life. We can all contribute to communities or matriarchies around us. And for me, being in community with other women or other people and valuing all life, starting an argument with someone because they've triggered me and I disagree with them, that might not always be getting me further in that path. And sometimes I might do that because that's my pattern and I need to get this off my chest and I need to just voice something and I need to tell someone how I feel about something. So I need to do that, right? But making the matriarchy is actually being in community with other people and leading by example. And if I'm leading by example, that's again all that I can ask myself to do. I can't always change people's mind, but I can voice what it is that I want, or I can try to live my life the way that I want to, regardless of what society or other people's opinions are. And maybe for me, that's enough. So everybody has their own path, and this will look different to absolutely everyone, but getting comfortable in your own path and knowing that even a step in the right direction or even a pause and reflection and noticing something, that's positive and that's good. And you should be proud of yourself for that.
Thank you, Kate. And I'm so glad that you decided to take a step and start your podcast because I think you have, like I said before, I've said it so many times, but after listening to you now, like I really feel like you have so much important things to say that people need to hear. And I hope you keep making episodes, and I hope that maybe we can have another conversation together in future and we can
Yeah.
talk about how things are going.
Yes,
So
absolutely. That would be great.
yeah, great. So thank you so much for coming today. Is there anything you would like to say before we wind up? Or
Yeah, I would just thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Again, I think we're all individuals, and although we're all individuals, we play an important piece and role in our surroundings. And every listener, you are important, you are valuable just for being you. And thank you for anything that you're doing to change the status quo within your own life or within things around you. It's hard to do things differently, but it's also brave. And good things can come of it, even when it feels like you're in the trenches and nothing good will come. Think good will come, and change, I think, will come for us. And it's our job to just do the best that we can and take small steps, even when we feel like they're insignificant, they're not.
thank you, Kate. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody who joined us today to listen. Check out Kate's podcast, Making Matriarchs. It's really amazing. And she just started it, but it's really powerful. And I recommend that you subscribe and keep listening to her as she shares more and more of her thoughts and her ideas with us. Thank you, Kate. Thank you again. And thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time.